Welcome back to Digital Trends Live. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. Of course, share the show, let other people know about it, and join in the conversations that we get to have. And certainly, the debate about law enforcement is far-reaching. There are many different topics to cover on that, but right now we're going to focus on one particular topic, and that is the use of tasers. It's the theme of an article that is up on the site right now. It's called Defund the Taser, and it's from Matt Stroud, who joins us right now here on the show to talk about this. Matt, thanks for being here with us to discuss this and discuss your article. And I wanted to start off by giving everybody a little bit of context, which honestly, when I read it, I didn't realize this either, which is the history of the taser and the use by law enforcement. Can you kind of give us a little bit of that backstory?
Sure. There's a guy named Jack Cover who came up with the idea of the taser in the late 1960s. And he quit his job with Hughes Aircraft. He was an executive with that company and tried to sell this for like 10 years. He worked on it in his basement. He tinkered around with it and wasn't actually able to sell it to anyone until the late 1970s. 1979, there was the death of a woman named Eula Love in Los Angeles, California. And in the wake of that, there were many protests. People were very upset about her killing. She was laid on a water bill, and people who were looking for her to pay her bill showed up. There was a fight that ensued, and the cops were called, and she ended up dead. Many protests followed that, and there was a commission set up through the Los Angeles Police Department trying to find non-lethal forms of weaponry for the police. It came down to the taser and one other device that it's called a bolo wrap that allows police officers to essentially shoot a wire at someone's feet and bring them down that way. And they decided that they were going to use the taser because it involved less humans who were actually involved, less officers who would actually need to be involved to carry out the de-escalation. And so that was the introduction to municipal policing for the taser. The idea was that you were going to have something that was essentially non-lethal that police officers could use to de-escalate a circumstance. I can go a little bit further, but what questions do you have after that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think just that alone it gives some very good context of, where this came from, because it's so prevalent right now. And we're so used to hearing the word taser and knowing that police forces use this, and going from that, it really is very prevalent. There are so many different organizations. Can you talk about that, about the widespread use of it, I guess, just again, for a little bit of an idea of how many departments use this and what some of the big issues are that have come up from tasers?
Tasers are in just about every police department in the country. There, might surprise people to know that there are somewhere around 18,000 police departments in the United States. And there is one main company that owns the patent for the taser. It's called Axon Enterprise. And it's been their work over the last, couple decades to make sure that tasers are in every one of those police departments. What has occurred, and this began in Los Angeles in 1979, Jack Cover, when he created the taser, he was very careful to ensure that the taser would not electrocute people. Like, there was a specific threshold of power that he knew was basically where the taser needed to be to ensure that it wasn't going to kill anybody. And when he brought it to the Los Angeles Police Department, they, the people who I've spoken with who were there at the time said that they went back to him and said, can you make this a little bit more powerful? Like, this doesn't have the stopping power that we really need. And in the 40 years that have transpired since then, and different manufacturers have taken over that patent, like I said, Axon owns it now, they've boosted the power and made some changes to the weapon, but it is essentially the same thing as it was 40 years ago. And when Cover made that decision to escalate the power of the taser initially, it started to kill people. So you would have people who were pulled over, police officer pulls out the taser and uses it thinking that it's a non-lethal weapon. And then as early as 1983, you start to see people who were documented to be, they died after being shocked with the taser. And now that number is in the thousands.
And which is horrible. Looking at it from this standpoint now, in your article being Defund the Taser, can you walk through what some of the different ways are that, I guess, what some of the ideas are to remove that from the police force? Like, since it's so many, you said 18,000 police departments and they all have tasers, how do we go about, changing that?
Actually, it's not that difficult. All of the tasers, they require these cartridges for use. So you have an initial purchase of the taser weapon, and then whenever the taser is used, you have to replace these cartridges. And if a police department makes a decision that they're no longer going to use these weapons, it's just a matter of not purchasing any more of these cartridges and not purchasing any more tasers themselves. And so, in a lot of cases, the tasers have already been purchased. That money has already been spent. But going into the future, they don't have to spend that money anymore, and those line items can begin to be eliminated over time.
Yeah, if it's cartridges, that makes a lot more sense. That you just stop buying the cartridges. That seems like a simple solution. Granted, I know nothing is as simple as that, but that does seem like a quick way to do that. What are some of the responses that have been to your article? Have you heard anything back yet?
I get a lot of the similar responses. I wrote a book about this. I wrote a book about high-tech policing and about the police-industrial complex, the businesses that make money off of police departments. It's called Thin Blue Lie. And when I wrote that book and wrote about Taser's role in high-tech policing, one of the main conversations around Taser is, all right, well, if the Taser is not your non-lethal alternative, then what is your non-lethal alternative? I'm not a criminologist. I'm a journalist. My work is in investigative journalism. But there are a lot of suggestions. There are a lot of studies that indicate that actually having conversations with people on the ground, getting to know them better. Community policing is kind of a cliche at this point, but at the core of that premise is a relationship between communities and the police who police them. And it's my belief, again, not as a criminologist or a lawyer, but that if police or the people who oversee different municipalities, different community, have a better relationship with the people who they police, then they'll have less of a need for weapons like the taser. They will be able to de-escalate with their words rather than these weapons that cost millions of dollars.
Well, I want to emphasize again, the article's up at Digital Trends right now, Defund the Taser. And as you said, you've got your book, Thin Blue Line, that people can certainly purchase as well. And Matt, I want to thank you very much for joining us here on Digital Trends Live to talk about this. It's a fantastic piece, really eye-opening for a few reasons on there, and also providing some solutions to some of these issues. Like you said, so many people have been hurt by this. So appreciate you writing it, appreciate you sharing this information and being here on Digital Trends Live with us.
Thanks very much for having me. I love the show.